The Sciforror Film Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Sciforror Film Podcast. This is an extra episode, and this week, and in the extra episode, I am very pleased to have with me artist extraordinaire, known to many horror fans all over the world, Graham Humphreys. Hello, Graham. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, I normally start off, I'll do it with you as well. How did you get into doing film posters, and especially how did you get into doing horror stuff?
Um, I guess it was something I kind of wanted to do as a child. I probably around about the age of about 11, 12, I was becoming more aware of film posters and their sort of design and their impact. And so I guess that's probably where it started. But I had been drawing, as a sort of toddler, I guess, anyway. So I had an interest in drawing and painting it already anyway, though. But yeah, I guess around about being, 12 years old or so, that's when I realized there was some sort of direction I could take. So, realistically, thinking about, the real world and having to earn a living, I went to art college to do graphic design. So kind of commercial art, I guess, is what they used to call it, and just found that the illustration work was probably more interesting for me, that I could communicate more with the paintings. So I did an extra year at art college, just specialising in illustration, and then from there, really just moved up to London, which is where all the clients would be, and just started taking my folio around, and was lucky within first 2 years to actually just make a couple of quite good contacts, and so yeah, within the first 2 years I was working on the Evil Dead poster, and so really that's really kind of how the horror stuff kind of really took off.
Okay, yeah, because in the 80s you worked on a number of films. Was it Palace Pictures?
Palace Pictures, yes, that was the client, yeah.
Yeah, and you, I mean, you did. I mean, I remember seeing some of the pictures on VHS cases and that sort of thing you did. Things, as you say, Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, Basket Case, and the Nightmare on Elm Street films. One, that I remember seeing a lot of the artwork for all of those.
Yeah, I think those are the ones that people will always remember as mine. I mean, obviously, I've done an awful lot of work since then.
Yeah,
Decades of work. But that's no bad thing. I'm glad that people are able to just see where all that stuff comes from. But those very important jobs right at the beginning, and for which I was very lucky. I'm still grateful that those actually came to me at that time. So yes, I don't mind that those define the career, because it's kind of it's good to have some sort of pedigree behind you, I guess, so that it's encouraging for potential new clients to know that there's some background there and some sort of proven
yeah.
track record.
I think the thing is as well is that was the sort of time those films and around the sort of mid to late 80s and that sort of thing, when the VHS thing took off in the late 80s, early 90s. That was when kind of more people got to see artwork that you would normally only see from the posters outside cinemas and that sort of thing. So I think the artwork became almost like the same sort of thing as an album cover, because of the fact that people recognized the artwork as soon as they saw it, because they'd seen it on the videos.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think perhaps even more so paperbacks, really. It's because I think the way, a lot of shops are racking up the VHSs. I mean, it is very much like a racking up books in a bookshop. And you're absolutely right, though, that it was great exposure because, film posters you would see at the point of sale, the cinemas themselves. You'd see them obviously in magazines and newspapers in the adverts for those cinemas.
Yeah,
But generally speaking, once those posters were no longer current, the next film was being shown, those images would disappear quite fast. And it wasn't until we had home entertainment, the VHS boxes that and it wasn't just confined to cinemas and magazines and newspapers then, because it's in every corner shop seemed to have a collection of videos you could rent. So it kind of was just everywhere, libraries, just anywhere would have that material. So the exposure was unexpectedly really, really good. And for somebody in my position as well, at that the beginning of my career, to have that work everywhere was quite, amazing.
I must admit the one of your illustrations I remember from a VHS video. I remember so vividly was the one for the Return of the Living Dead,
Hmm.
because that was such a striking picture, and it kind of really sold the film so well. Um, so, I mean, when you're making the pictures, when you've got a film to do, do you sit and watch the film and then sort of like take pieces of it? Because it always seems all your pictures seem to have very there are pieces in it that the things you highlight in your pictures always seem to be really striking points within the film, and I find that really it's got you must have an incredibly good eye to pick out those pieces.
I mean, I think part of that's experience to an extent, but one thing that I've always found was that most films used to come with a series of publicity stills. There was always a sort of press pack
Yeah,
that would be provided, and obviously in cinemas you would see the lobby cards. Those were the official press images. So those images would be quite familiar to people. So my job was always to try and um, find images that weren't quite as obvious, if you like, and usually to come up with some sort of key concept as well, some sort of conceit you could put in there, which would actually justify why those images were arranged as they were. But it's funny, in the 80s you would be often supplied with a series of press shots, and
right.
very occasionally that's all you would get. And I'd work on something not having seen the film, but only having some stills to work with. There would be a synopsis, so you'd have a general idea what the film was about. But yeah, so nowadays, of course, I'll be sent a link, a sort of video link, or an actual physical disc. And if it's a reissue of an older film, then you can usually get hold of the film from one place to another anyway, though. So, but yeah, it's my job is really partly to just find those little moments in a film, particularly where portraiture is concerned, that where you have the most expressive faces,
Yeah,
or faces which kind of give you a range, hopefully, of the textures within the film. Whether it be some shock, some sort of amusement, or villainy, what have you. There's all these different aspects you can pile in, which will then give you the promise of the film in the same way that film posters have always done as well.
yeah, yeah. No, as I say, I always, whenever I look at your posters, I always think you managed to pick out some really good images from the
Yeah,
film.
I always say that when you're looking for an expression, I mean, it's always the way that you play a little moment backwards and forwards, because there's always just this one split second where the expression is absolutely perfect. You could just freeze it, and it just conveys so much. But you'll find that a second before or a second after, that little moment is gone. So it is a very precise um, thing that I have to do, is to just identify those little split second moments.
Yeah, no, and you do it very, very well. Um, So I noticed since the 2000s you've been working with the BFI on their video arm for films that they've put out. Have there been any major films that you've done for them?
I think the one that I would say was probably the most unusual. And I've got to try and remember what the film was. It was and it's a classic. It's so classic I can't even remember the bloody title. It's yes, it was a sort of a wartime classic, and I'm embarrassed now. I can't even
Oh,
remember what it was. It'll just come to me. But yeah, the it was interesting because it was not a horror genre. It was war and with romance as well. And it was just interesting, kind of working in an area that it was less familiar to me. But the imagery is still classic imagery, so it's still film poster imagery.
yeah,
So that was great to do. And yeah, there have been some other things which are not sort of what I'd consider genre, but of course I've been working with them on a series, our short, sharp shocks, which are just a collection of short films which are in the archives, which not really have had much exposure and probably
all
just
right,
would have just be disappeared into the archives, never to be seen again.
yeah.
So it's quite nice to see some of this stuff kind of brought out to be viewed once more and just packaging them in a very sort of simple form, just trying to lift out intriguing little images which can give you part of the range of that group of films.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, you've also done. You say about the fact studied graphic design, and you've done graphic design for different magazines. Some of them to do with cinema, some of them for other things, including the F1 magazine, things like that. Do you enjoy doing the graphic art for magazines?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think because it was a discipline I learned. And particularly when illustration kind of fell out of favor for a while, because of Photoshop, being the sort of new kid on the block.
Yeah,
I was the old kid on the block, so I was just pushed aside. But thing is that I did a lot of work which was not illustration, but just using photoshopped images and doing layouts and going back to those graphic design roots. So that art college training was the best investment I made. I mean, 3 years doing graphic design has just stayed with me now. So I still put on my sort of graphic designer hat, if you
yeah,
were, when it's needed and necessary. Also means that with that extra knowledge, I can be confident in putting together a film poster in its entirety. So rather than just providing the image, I can then, create the title treatment, place the credit blocks, and
yeah,
consider all the fonts and actually create my own fonts if necessary. So delivering the whole package, which is not a skill range that all illustrators have. Some do, but a lot of people don't. And actually having a very grounded knowledge of printing and how printing works, and just knowing those little things. I mean, it's fine working on a screen, delivering stuff digitally, but yeah, a lot of this stuff ultimately goes onto paper, ink on paper. So knowing how that process works and knowing what the parameters are, if you like, in terms of
yeah,
what colors work and what colors won't. I mean, people who work on a screen will see a vast range of really quite, um, very often very bright colors, which you just cannot reproduce with ink on paper at all. And I've had sort of I've had some young artists seeking advice from me, saying, "How is it that when I print this stuff up, as limited edition prints or whatever, it doesn't look the same?" And I have to explain, well, your screen colors are going to be different to your printed colors, and explain exactly why. Once they understand, then that's fine, and it's good. They can then adjust the
yeah.
way they work to suit. But yeah, it can be very disappointing when you're creating something on screen. It just looks so bright and lurid, and then it just looks so flat and dull on paper.
So when you're making a poster now, do you still work with paper and ink uh,
Sure,
and
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
rather
I've
than
got um, here I've got I was finishing off a job yesterday because you can see it's a mixing palette. There was a plate, a whole plate with, and that's the paints that I use there as well. So yeah, it's all hand painted still. And then obviously once the painting's finished, there's a pile of them behind me. You can see
Yeah.
that's the last sort of 6 months. Um, I scan in the artwork and then deliver it digitally. So you know, basically the paintings stay here. It all just goes down the magic line to the straight to the client, and I'd say pretty much 99% what I see on my screen once it's been scanned is exactly as things print.
All
The
right.
color is accurate and the density is accurate. I mean, I've never been disappointed with a print job, I don't think.
Cool, cool. I've got to ask, as an artist yourself, the big thing at the moment, and it's creating some people sort of camps for and against. What are your views on AI as far as art
Um,
is concerned?
yeah, I have some views on AI. Of course, I do. Anybody in the creative industry does. That's
Yeah,
true. I mean, that goes across the board because you could be an actor and be worried about AI. You could be a musician, obviously an artist,
yeah,
um, a director. I mean, just all the creative industries are, I don't want to say they're under threat because maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I did see something interesting today, actually, which was um, uh, where somebody's looking or trying to explain the difference between digital art and AI.
yeah.
Now, there are obviously a lot of artists who work digitally now. It's on a tablet and all the stuff is on screen. There's no paint, there's no mess involved, no bits of paper, no rolled up paintings in the background. None of that. So it's
Mm.
all just very clean, very clinical, scientific, and obviously the artist's skill then is to kind of imbue it with some sort of life, so it's not mechanical. Um, but that still means the artist, putting their self into the painting technique and the imbuing it with some sort of soul, I guess, though, some sort of integrity.
Yeah,
So that's working. That's just using another medium. I mean, I use paint, but I could be just equally, just using a sort of tablet like this and using a stylus. But it's still the artist controlling those marks.
yeah,
Whereas AI has nothing to do with that. AI is literally it's archival stuff scraped from everybody's work and just mixed up. It's like a collage of stuff, and obviously you can set using that word parameters again. You can sort of say something in the style of a 1950s poster or something in the style of a 1920s press ad. You can type in all these things and it will just generate the stuff for you, but it's not a genuine original piece. It's stuff which is an approximation made up of many parts, which is pinched from elsewhere.
yeah,
Now, as artists, we all take inspiration. So it could be argued we're kind of doing that to an extent already. But the thing is, it's got to go through the sort of the flesh and the blood and a bit of torture and stuff you do to yourself, and to produce something which is a bit more visceral. And the thing with AI is it's not the only creative aspect of it is the prompt really, because everything else is just there. It all exists somewhere in the ether and it's just pulled in just for the prompt. So it could be argued that there is value in the prompting, that there's some artistry there. In the
yeah,
same way that a director directs a film, he doesn't act in it, but he directs the actors, but that's not him acting.
yeah,
So I can see where that argument lies. But the fact is that as an artist myself, all the body of work, somewhere that's being scraped on the internet and will, in some unrecognizable form, possibly appear in some AI generated work, but I haven't given my permission. Nobody's going to be paying money for the use of that work at all, and that's the issue. It's that it's
Hey,
cutting out the artist. Oh, ultimately, I think what it will do, it just means that everything will become so homogenized. I mean, already I look at AI work, I know straight away it's AI work because it looks homogenized already. You
yeah,
know, and I feel dismay sometimes that you get an independent film company, producing. posters, they could be pre-sales or just teasers for projects. They're using AI to generate posters. I think, well, yeah, you're championing the work of your directing skills and the work of actors and the film industry, and yet here it is somehow you're blocking out this one crucial element, which is the marketing. You're actually forgetting that actually these are creative people as well who also want to be involved in the independent industry. And I'm always going to champion independent films wherever I can.
Yeah,
But I'm an independent item in myself as well, though. And so I deserve to have a place somewhere, which is in the real world, in the same way that the director would, or the producer, or the actors, musicians, etc. So yeah, I
yeah.
mean that's as far as I can go with the AI discussion without getting really worked
Yeah,
up.
no, I mean, I agree. I think I mean, there is the worry that it will replace people or whatever. But my biggest thing is the fact that it will. I think it will. Everything will become homogenized, and we'll end up with just this bland sort of everything being the same, and there not being any kind of originality in anything.
Well, it's the
Um,
ultimate yes man in a way. It's just, you say, I want this, and says, yes, there you go. So no
yeah.
one's going to say, well, actually, I want to do it in a slightly different way, or I'm going to just ignore what you just said. I'm going to do this, and it's not what you wanted, what you expected, but it kind of works.
And
So it might just, I think my worry is it just removes that element of uncertainty, of the
yeah.
element of surprise, that the unexpected discovery, if you like, because I think it's all focused and controlled.
Absolutely. I mean, you do think, I mean, when if you work on films or you work in music, because you're doing it in collaboration with people, quite often somebody will say, well, hang on a minute, what if we do it this way? And you hadn't thought about that at all. And it just kind of sparks something that's new and interesting. And I suppose if you're working, even if you're working on your own, you may see something different or see something from an angle that you hadn't thought about looking at it, and then it changes your entire kind of view of what it is you're creating. But yeah, you don't get that with AI, and it worries me that we're going to lose that to a certain extent. Which is why I think independent films are going to start being something that people are going to possibly turn to more and more, especially if the big companies start using AI a
Mm.
lot. So I don't know, swings
Well,
and roundabouts.
you tend to get backlashes against
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah, it always happens. So I mean, it's the latest new thing. I mean, everybody thought Photoshop was going to kill off illustration, for posters and home, entertainment and everything, and record covers even. But that just didn't happen. I mean, it came back with a vengeance, and as somebody who probably is in a profession that looked like it had its day in about 1990, I'm sort of now still doing what I do, but busier than I've ever been in my entire life, which is
yeah,
extraordinary, really.
absolutely, definitely. Talking about album covers, I was looking to see that you have been commissioned at different times to do um, classic horror movie soundtrack album covers. Um, and you've also done some album covers for Rob Zombie.
Hmm.
And did you do any other bands? I thought there was another band that you.
Well, I mean, I've the last thing. Well, in fact, actually, it just came out yesterday. This week is the Damned new album, an album of
Oh,
covers. So I've worked with the Damned on a number of projects now. So this is the third cover I've done for them. So the previous one was Darkadelic, the last sort of full Damned studio album, and then there was also a reunion tour project, which entailed having a LP cover and DVD cover, etc. So yeah, and I worked with them on a number of posters and T-shirts in the past as well.
with the Rob Zombie stuff, you did album covers for him. Have you done film posters for his films as well?
No, not film posters, but I did. I have worked on. I guess they were kind of like anniversary issues of his films on sort of 4K
Okay.
restorations. So he commissioned me to do a House of a Thousand Corpses for a 4K release, and then also more recently Devil's Rejects, and I'm going to presume that Three Go to Hell will probably be the next in line now. Yeah, fingers crossed. But
Yeah.
no, but I think that those came about because I've been working on the soundtrack covers. So it's like a Rob Zombie presents, series of soundtracks, classic horror film soundtracks.
Right. Okay. And you read it's right. I found three books of your work that have been put out. The latest one was in 2023. That's
Ta-da!
yeah, Nightmare on one sheet. Uh, have they done very well, the books?
I don't see the numbers, to be quite honest. I
Ah,
mean, I have had royalties back, so no, there are definitely sales. Yeah, I think the first one, the companion book to this one, the Hung Drawn and Executed, the last one before this, was went into a reprint, and that's now, as far as I know, pretty much gone. So hopefully this will chug along as well, and ultimately sell out as well, be out of print.
cool.
I'd
I
like to
kind of
think, I'd love to think there'll be another one because I've done since this last book, I've done a huge body of work, probably another 200 pieces of work. So, and some of it I think is among the finest I've done. So, fingers crossed there'll be a third volume.
I kind of hope it's kind of your books end up in the way because when I was younger, I used to go to the library and in the non-fiction section there was a big book there that was all about horror films and it had pictures from the 1930s Universal films and all that kind of thing and all the information about the films and about the artwork and all that kind of thing. And I used to love just sitting there and looking through the pictures and reading about it and all that sort of thing. And I just kind of hope that your books end up in a library somewhere and some kid will go in and take it off the shelf and just sit there and think, look at this, this is brilliant.
Well, that would be good to think. I mean, yeah, that's what I did as a kid as well. Just take inspiration from, stuff I saw in the library. I guess back in the day when we didn't have video machines. There was no internet. You
Yeah,
usually had two channels on TV, and but there were libraries, and that's where you'd immerse yourself in stuff which you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else because there was something very random about walking into a library and just seeing all those shelves of books and just being able to pull something out not knowing what was going to be in there at all. And I am talking about, probably in the art sections, etc., where you have images. I mean, obviously, you have the books which are your written words, but I'm talking about, as a kid,
yeah.
especially you're more interested in the images, the pictures, and that's what you want to see. So, I mean, yeah, certainly that those library visits as a kid really influence my work and some of the directions the work has gone in, and also some of the color palettes as well. Um, and but yeah, we're talking about work which goes way back, to what I guess medieval art,
Yeah.
religious art. So a lot of stuff, all this random stuff that appeared in libraries. I mean, now we can go onto the internet. You can just type in some sort of little thing, and it'll give you some images. But I don't think you get the randomness, because again, it's like you have to make a prompt, and then you'll
Yeah.
get back what you basically type in. So it's. I mean, occasionally you'll find that something will open up. Like, you'll get a little bit of a sort of hint of, well, if you refer to this, perhaps you should you might want to know about this, that kind of thing.
I
I think.
remember I remember being I mean the first horror films I saw were the Universal black and white Universal horror monster films and I remember there being a series on TV of the Roger Corman Edgar Allan Poe films which blew my mind with the color of them and that sort of thing. But I remember my dad had a book about silent cinema,
Mhm.
and there was an amazing section. I'd never seen anything like this before at all. And I remember there being a section there which was all about the films of Lon Chaney
How about yeah?
and seeing the pictures of him as the Phantom of the Opera and the Mask of the Red Death and things like that. It was just like this is incredible, incredible pictures.
Mm. And that's amazing because I mean. he was a real artist. I mean, obviously a very talented actor, but because he created all his own makeup,
Yeah,
which actually you can't do now. I mean, I think it's all quite union controlled, and you have to employ makeup artists to do that. Nobody tends to do their own makeup unless it's like in a theatre production, for instance.
yeah,
But if it's in film, it does tend to be unionized, and yeah, it just doesn't really happen in that kind of way anymore. But he was great because he would really immerse himself in his roles to the extent that he would change his physicality. I mean, he had, he would create braces and things and things to hinder his
yeah,
movement so he could actually appear crippled or hunchback or whatever. And actually, quite often doing actual real physical damage to himself in pursuit of this kind of perfection. And,
absolutely.
you know, I mean, he had that nickname, Man of a Thousand Faces. I can't imagine he ever did 1,000 characters or
No,
makeup
but
effects,
yeah,
but with a range, I mean, that you would not know that hunchback character was the Phantom of the Opera, or was this woman in this other kind of thriller, or London After Midnight, the vampire. There, I
yeah,
mean, just this complete range of stuff. Amazing.
absolutely. He was quite incredible. Just as a thing, I don't know. Have you ever worked with anybody on designing looks for people in films at all? Have you ever thought about doing that?
Well, it is a skill set which is a set that I don't really have myself. It's something if that's it's something you have to go into with some sort of foreknowledge and some sort of formal training, I should imagine. Well, I think that's definitely the case. But because I'd already sort of made the decision to work in 2 dimensions on, paint on paper, that was what I pursued. But within the storyboarding, occasional bits of storyboarding I have done in the past, that was an opportunity to uh, do some sort of pre-production concept work, if
Right,
you like. So have not actually worked on, creating monsters as such, but there have been elements within films where I've had a little bit of input, which hopefully did nudge things in a certain direction. I mean, I think definitely we had that with Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau, and to an extent, elements in his first film Hardware as well,
right,
um, within the sort of the early concepts for a robot design, for instance. But with Moreau, there were certain things I put into some pre-production paintings, which I think did have some sort of influence in the way things were then formally designed by obviously people with the proper skill set.
right, cool. You were saying that there is a documentary which has just come out all about your work and everything, which you've been going to and doing Q&A things with and that sort of thing. You were saying there's another one coming up. Where is that going to be?
Okay, so it's a film called Captured Souls, and subtitled In Conversation with Graham Humphrey. So the premise of the documentary is it is essentially about my early work, um, but that's also presented through a series of interviews with people that were connected to that. So
Okay.
we talk about the Evil Dead, for instance, and in talking about that, we interview Mark Morris from Nucleus Films, who basically, when he was a young fellow like myself at the time, we were into the same music, seeing the same films, and whereas I was designing the poster for The Evil Dead, he was a sort of the audience going to see The Evil Dead. And we were all going to this place called the Batcave at the same time. So we're sort of like in a sort of goth scene, I guess, though. And so we make that little cultural connection.
Right.
Um, Kathy Unsworth, who wrote the autobiography or biography rather of Jordan, the girl that worked in Malcolm McLaren Moving Westward shop. We talk about the cover I did for that and kind of what the brief was and how Jordan had input into that cover. Obviously, she passed away sadly last year,
Yeah.
but and the cultural context for that as well. And so it goes through a whole load of stuff, and right up to the Inside Number 9 series poster work that I did for Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton. So we interviewed Reece Shearsmith as well. So we did a screening this last week in Lewes, East Sussex, at an independent cinema there, and we had Madeline Smith, the actress, as a guest, and Peter Fuller, who works with Victoria Price on her father's legacy.
Yeah.
Because Vincent Price is talked about quite a lot within the documentary. Obviously, Madeline Smith worked with Vincent Price on Theatre of Blood,
Yeah.
for instance. And so we're the Prince Charles screening, Prince Charles Cinema in London, will be on the 10th of March. There are still tickets available. And we're hoping that Reece Shearsmith will be joining us and we can just bring his own kind of experience of his own sort of love of horror from his childhood as well into that, and then also talk about the Inside Number 9 work as well. And Kathy Unsworth will be there to talk about Jordan's book as well.
Cool. No, that's cool. Okay. So I've got to ask, I mean, apart from doing this work and that sort of thing, you are also a fan of horror films and that sort of thing.
Oh
Do
yeah.
you are you as much of a fan of modern horror films as old ones?
It depends, you know. It's you know, I wouldn't say all old horror films are great. There's some terrible old horror films, but some
Yeah.
really good ones, of course. But and I think, you know, there are new classics being made right now. I mean, we've just seen that Sinners has just been got the most Oscar nominations of any film ever,
Yeah.
actually. And
Mm.
Weapons, you know, I thought was absolutely fantastic as well. You know, another very original piece of filmmaking. I love The Monkey. I absolutely loved The Monkey.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are new films, and yes, I am a fan of new horror films as well. There's a lot of stuff I'm not interested in, but you know, a lot of people hate me for saying this, but I'm not. I cannot find myself liking the Terrifier films. I'm not. That's not to say they're not worth anything. You know, they're there. They serve a purpose, and they have an audience, a very big audience, and that's fantastic. And you know, if it's elevating, if it's bringing horror to the screen, then you know that's got to be championed anyway. Though, because those Terrifier films will also inspire other people to go into films and inspire other ideas. So they're all kind of things you throw out there, and you know, people take from it what they will. It's just like fashion in a way. You know, people you see stuff on a catwalk that looks completely insane and silly, and nobody's ever going to wear that. Well, maybe they don't, but what it does do is it inspire the high street stuff as well. So everything has some valid, you know,
Yeah.
something to offer. And you know, if a film's a bad film, or I think it's a bad film, or anybody else does, it's an opinion, but you know, everything has its merit. So you know, everything is good.
I mean, I must admit, I mean, I first met you at the film club that was run by Billy Chainsaw
That's right, yes.
in the Halt Hospital
Oh,
at Russell Square. And the thing I found quite amusing was talking to some people when I said about going there and the sort of things that I was watching there. When I then said that I really liked a kind of mainstream sort of run-of-the-mill film, people thought there was something wrong with that because it was like they expected me to only like these kind of underground, obscure films.
yeah. Oh, you know, I think a lot of mainstream stuff has been influenced by underground stuff. You know, it's absolutely the case. And you know, obviously, if you've got a big budget on a film, you have to have some sort of understanding of commerce. You know, a big budget has to it's got to make money
Yeah,
ultimately because that's how things get made, how people get paid, and everything else. So that's not to say you can't have an underground cult cinema in tandem. And you know, I mean, I think Guillermo del Toro is a very good example of somebody who can make a very commercial film, but then will also make something which even he knows is probably not going to make that much money, but he has enough clout that they know, you know, whoever's backing him will know that okay, we'll allow this project because we know he will have something else which is going to make loads of money and then
yeah,
you know, ahead. And I think there is some sort of leeway for that. And there's a fantastic story about Sean Connery, for instance, who when he was approached to do Never Say Never. Um, reprise, basically a remake of Thunderball, reprising
Yeah,
James Bond role, which he was, he happy to acknowledge, yes, he was far too old to play that, but they knew it was a kind of marquee name, and they thought, yeah, he agreed to do it. Obviously, got a very good fee, but the understanding was that if he could be involved in making the name of the rose,
right.
uh, which he stars, of course, as well.
Yeah,
And so we got Never Say Never, and also we got the name of the rose.
yeah. Well, I mean, I always look at the thing is like George Clooney was saying about the making the Oceans films that he made allowed him to have the money and the backing to make things like The Men Who Stare at Goats,
Yeah, yeah.
which is, I mean, that's never going to make a huge amount of money, that film.
But to me, that shows some sort of integrity as well. He knows there's a craft which he is involved with, and he wants to see, a variety of things out there, to give
Absolutely.
us those options. And because we're just in a world of commercial films, then it's cutting out so much. Though, and there's also it's kind of it's blocking new talent as well, because new talent isn't going to get money behind them straight
No,
away. So new
absolutely.
talent needs the low budget stuff to get noticed, and then they can go on, move their way up.
Absolutely. Definitely. Okay. I can't think. I don't think there's much we haven't covered really. Could I just ask, are there any films that you have loved that you've always thought you wish you could have made a film poster for?
Yeah, I guess so. But I have actually done a lot of work more recently, the last kind of few years, where I have been doing sort of alternative posters for some of those films. So films that I would never have been asked to do a poster for at the time. Um, Suddenly I'm doing my own version of a poster, which would be for that film if I had that control and without, the commercial constraints that would have been there at the time. So that is kind of happening, and I've got some projects ahead, which again, will be me indulging in my love of horror, and a bit of hammer horror as well, and
Oh,
such
cool.
like. So yeah, there's stuff ahead. So I don't have there's nothing I can think of which I think I really wish I'd been able to do that, because there is still work ahead, and who knows, you know in 6 months' time, I could be working on something which is that one thing I've always wanted to do. So yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, well, I wish you all the best of luck with the film showing in March.
10th of
And
March, Prince Charles Cinema, which is where, of course, The Evil Dead had its first London run. So there's a reason for it being there as well.
yeah, yeah. I hope the book goes well and goes into a second run or whatever.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I hope that you stay well and everything is good for you in work-wise.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's appreciated.
No problem at all. Can I, anybody out there who's watching, listening, I will put links to Graham's social media and to where you can get his book and all that kind of thing. And keep an eye out for his work in the future. So thank you, Graham, for being on the show.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you to everybody out there for watching and listening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
The Sciforror Film Podcast.